The heroes in a half shell are back again, and they still don't miss. Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the latest take on the classic series, and with all the new portrayals of classic characters, plus a couple new ones, we figured it was only right to rank them from good to evil. As usual, we'll start with the most respectable reptiles and work our way down. These are the good characters. And this time around, we're giving our gold medal of good to the first of the main four, Mikey. Mikey is often the butt of the joke for not really having as clear of a role as his brothers. Leo's the leader, Raph is the brawn, and Donnie is the brains. But what does that make Mikey? Well, I say it's quite simple. He's the heart. Like in Mutant Mayhem and basically every other TMNT installment, Mikey is characterized as an easygoing, friendly guy.
Yeah, these guys aren't our enemies.
They're gonna blow up the seawall and flood the entire city.
He's more than willing to fight for what's right, sure, but what sets him apart from the other heroes is how far he's willing to go to avoid violence.
I know exactly who you are. A dude who's tall enough to reach that chicken broth for me.
In the first episode, he encourages Raph to try being nice to people instead of just fighting them, and this sense of kindness is prevalent throughout the whole arc, with him even seeming to feel bad for insulting his opponents, as we see during his fight with Lee. What gives him the gold medal over everyone else, though, is the fact that Mikey's kindness doesn't stop at his friends and family. Despite knowing that Bishop's intern, Rod, is technically part of a plan that threatens to wipe out his entire race, Mikey doesn't hesitate to push him out of the way of a massive firework explosion, saving his life. Later on, he fights off one of the Mechazoids to protect both Rod and Pigeon P. While it wasn't easy to order, Mikey is the kind of character who's tough to beat in a battle of goodwill. But the left brain is just as crucial as the right, and that's why our silver medal of good has to go to Donnie. Donnie gets a lot more spotlight in this series than he did in Mutant Mayhem, which is definitely a plus. In episode 4, he starts out strong by getting a Mechazoid to target himself instead of two police officers who were more concerned with writing a book about mutants than protecting the people.
Leave them alone! I'm the mutant here! Come and get me!
Heck, actually, throughout this whole episode, humans treat Donnie like he's some kind of urban legend celebrity.
Hey, can we get an autograph?
Which I guess isn't wrong per se, but it was clearly burdening the guy, and that makes it all the more impressive that Donnie was able to save the entire train full of people, despite having zero backup. He also arguably gets the most direct conflict with Bishop out of all the Turtles, on top of rightly calling her out on her hypocrisy. Which we'll talk about later, he ends up using her technology against her by creating a robot that protects mutants. Finally, like Mikey, he's surprisingly sympathetic. When he's giving a recap of the train episode, he mentions that Bishop might have some tragic backstory nobody knows about yet, and later on he helps Wingnut through a pretty bad moment of panic. The bronze medal of good goes to another turtle, but not a traditional one. It's Metalhead. And okay, I'll admit that this guy doesn't get too much spotlight. But come on, how much convincing do you really need? He's a friendly robot who exists solely to protect the existence of the mutants Bishop is trying to eradicate. He even gets destroyed trying to protect them and straight up apologizes to his enemies for destroying them.
I sincerely apologize.
Hopefully they put him back together later on because, come on, this is peak character design.
But he's a robot. We can probably just turn him on later. We totally won!
Next is our first non-turtle mutant, Pigeon Pete. He's a man of few words, well, until the end of the season at
You
least.
took me under your wing, and I will never forget it. So thank you.
But despite being made on accident by Mikey, this little guy turned big guy ended up being one of the Turtles' most dependable allies. In episode 6, he was actually responsible for stopping the Mechazoid's rampage, being the only one capable of bringing the EMP blast high enough to deactivate them. He might not be able to count, but he is able to be counted on, and that earns him a lot of credit. Now it's finally time to talk about Splinter. Splinter has done a lot of growing since Mutant Mayhem. He's still a devoted, concerned father to his kids and a general altruist to mutant kind in general. But he's far less overprotective than he used to be. Heck, he's even got enough faith in his boys to send them out into the storm in groups so they can learn to get along better with the mutanimals.
You all need to get out of here.
You want us to go outside.
It's raining!
You are turtles. A little water will do you good.
Though we have to criticize that move a little bit since he implies that he did that, at least in part, to get some peace and quiet. but I'd still argue that he's earned that. He also earns the Lust Sinner Medal for what's admittedly a pretty funny reason. Since Jackie Chan didn't reprise his role for the series, Splinter instead spends the majority of the show speaking in Vermin for the sake of his new girlfriend, Scumbag. I guess that's a way to save money on voice actors. Next, we have the sorta kinda leader of the team, Leonardo. When it comes to morals, he's a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, he's definitely a good guy, and his goodwill often leads his brothers to do things they usually wouldn't on their own. This is very prominent throughout the first half of the season, where he convinces the team to go out and see what the mutant alert they got was all about, and later on even convince them to help save Bishop from her own rebellious robots. This is all some pretty good stuff on his record, but the reason we can't put Leo any higher is the same reason he gets the Pride Sinner Medal. Simply put, Leo doesn't have great listening skills. In episode 11, he completely missed the fact that Pete was trying to warn him about danger because he was too busy, ironically, criticizing Pete for not listening.
What's his problem?
Yeah, sorry about him. He's only been a mutant for a few weeks.
This shows that Leo has a pretty big ego problem, constantly thinking he's better than the people around him, and being pretty hesitant to consider alternate viewpoints. Still, there's no denying that he's a good guy. He's just also a teenager, and he's got plenty of growth to do. And at last, we've reached our first human character, April O'Neil. So, the first reason April lands this low is because she's implied to be a Drake fan. Just kidding. Sure, April is antisocial, but she earns a lot of points for being a genuinely great friend. As an aspiring journalist, she uses her talents to help put the Turtles in a positive light. She also insists on going back to help Splinter out during the storm.
Look, the storm's only gonna get worse. I'm coming to get you.
Which is especially impressive for one of the few characters in the series without any mutant powers or fighting experience. She's a good friend, and hopefully we'll see more of her in action as the series goes on. Now let's talk about the last of the main four, Raph. I'm gonna start this one off with a shocker. Raph isn't getting the Wrath Medal. I know, it's a hot take, but it'll make sense later. For now, just know that Raph has been able to show off more of his good character traits in this series. Despite his initial reaction to Mikey saying he should try being nice to his enemies, it turns out that Raph took this advice to heart and used it to get out of a near-death conflict with the Purple Dragons.
We're the Purple Dragons, and we run 7th Ave between 40 and 42nd. I changed my mind.
If you are convinced that he's grown, later on in episode 6, the Turtles confront Bishop. Now, let me remind you, Bishop is literally proposing a plan of mutant genocide. But despite this, Raph initially comments that they should talk about it. Raph is still the same hilarious hothead we know and love, but he's also gained some much-needed patience and restraint.
You gotta give the people what they want.
But I guess if you refuse said patience and restraint, well, it's nice knowing you. Closing out the good category, we have an umbrella entry for the Mutanimals. Ray Fillet, Scumbag, Wingnut, and Leatherhead. That's right, all the Mutanimals from Mutant Mayhem made a triumphant return in the series. Well, almost all of them.
Peoples, they got to go.
We'll never forget you, Mondo Gecko. But that aside, yeah, the Mutanimals are pretty chill. They basically show up to help the Turtles learn a little bit more about themselves through sympathizing over their flaws. This is clearly why Mondo Gecko isn't there, because, as you all know, he is without flaw.
So, let's just stop and vibe.
There isn't much to say about these guys, but they're all good mutant people when you get to know them. But with that said, let's move on to our more questionable characters. This is the moral gray area. And before anyone says we forgot about one of the Mutanimals, worry not, Genghis Frog is here. And first of all, he gets the Gluttony Sinner Medal. This little guy ate everything in the fridge, which is already pretty darn inconsiderate. But then when he and Mikey go to get groceries, he tries to eat Mr. Whiskers multiple times.
Baby, I don't want the cat that bad.
To his credit, he does relent, which, given how much he seems to love eating, couldn't have been easy. Still, it might be worth keeping an eye on this guy. Oh yeah, and I didn't forget Bebop and Rocksteady. They just actually weren't in the movie. Not as sad an exclusion as Mondo, but still. And without further ado, let's move on to a brand new character, Rod. Rod has already become a fan favorite, and it's pretty easy to see why. Sure, he's lazy, a little insensitive, and pretty self-centered, not to mention the fact that he's working for Bishop. That said, he's only working there because his father pushed him to.
I'm just in charge of the snacks, man.
On top of being a generally okay dude, he also provides some much appreciated comedic relief on the show. He does have to take home the Sloth Sinner Medal for his lack of any real ambition aside from be mutant.
The snack situation here is seriously lame, dudes.
But at the end of the day, Rod has his good qualities. For example, when Bishop and Rod first confront the Turtles, Rod suggests that they do just seem like normal kids, aside from the whole being turtles thing. He may not be a hero or anything, but he is a decent enough guy at the end of the day. And while he has a very small role, we're gonna give his dad, Roderick Underwood Sr., a quick mention too. There's just something about rich guys in cartoons that makes you immediately assume they're evil. It doesn't help Roderick's case that he seems like kind of a jerk, but nonetheless, he also apparently loves his son. I know, bare minimum, but come on. The fact that he invested in someone whose invention he didn't really care about just to make his son happy is really sweet, all else aside.
Dad, you're never gonna believe it. I know what I want to be. A mutant!
Now we're finally entering the sorta, kinda villain territory, starting with Mustang Sally. The first of the East River Three, Sally is a simple seahorse. He wants to have babies and take care of them, which he can't do if he doesn't have a home.
I'll do whatever I have to do for my kids.
On top of that being a pretty tame villain motivation, we also can't take too many points off for his role in the Three's plan to flood the city, since he implies later that he genuinely didn't know that most humans can't swim and therefore wouldn't survive a flood. And next we have his devoted partner, Lee the Eel. Weird backwards name aside, Lee is similar to Sally, though admittedly she's more short-tempered and violent. During her fight with Mikey in the store, she electrocutes the water that's flooded into the place, knowingly risking the lives of everyone inside. But, like Sally, she has her sympathetic traits. On top of being loyal to her friends, she also has a lot of sympathy for sea creatures. During the heist of the Pearl, she sees a dried-out squid, which horrifies her so much that she gets distracted and sets off an alarm.
Teddy! What did they do to you?
We'll get to the leader of this team much later, but for now, just know that 2 out of 3 have proven themselves pretty redeemable. And narrowly avoiding the bad category, we have the strongest member of the Purple Dragons, Hun. There's something charming about the big brutish gang member who has a heart of gold deep down.
One.
And that's Hun in a nutshell, basically. Despite being involved in a violent gang, he's not really a terrible guy. He dislikes violence enough for other members to criticize him for it, saying he needs to toughen up.
What did I do to deserve all this attitude?
He's also known to be an animal lover and won't tolerate hurting anything from a chicken to a kitten.
What is wrong with you, frog?
But while Hun has a lot of good traits, being involved with the dragons in such a pivotal way is something we can't fully excuse him for. He also definitely deserves the Darwin Sinner Medal, like the guy thought Raph was a crab. But without further ado, it's finally time to enter the bad and evil category. And first up here is Angel. She's the only other prominent member of the Purple Dragons in this series, so you can basically consider her the representative for the group here. The dragons aren't exactly pure evil, but they're still pretty bad. Their members are expected to be ruthless in their methods, and they're willing to do some pretty messed up stuff to earn money. That aside, Angel specifically does have her moments of decency, like letting Raph leave after he helped fight off the Mechazoids.
You saved Hun. He's a big idiot, but he's my idiot. We're even.
That shows some level of humility and respect, and while it's nowhere near enough to call her less than a bad guy, it's possible that the dragons could eventually become allies to the Turtles and maybe even friends. Next is arguably the simplest criminal on our list, Bad Bernie.
Innocent man, simply trying to make a living.
Now normally I'd say never judge a book by its cover, but come on. This guy is as sketchy as it gets, and his personality lives up to it. He's a con artist and arguably a sadist. When he bribed Goldfin to steal the pearl in the first place, he forced him to prove his loyalty by eating a piece of sushi. He's a scumbag in the simplest sense of the word, but even so, there are a few characters who manage to be far worse. And this might be a surprise, but we're giving the Mechazoids a bottom 3 spot, with the bronze medal of evil. I definitely feel like there's a case to place these guys higher and lower, but this feels like the right spot. On one hand, were they allowed to keep going their own way, they would have caused more destruction than any other villain in the show. Despite being created by Bishop for the sake of destroying all mutants, they revolted against her by gaining sentience in episode 6.
You have failed, Mechazoid mutants are superior to organic life forms.
And deciding that the best course of action was to destroy all life, both human and mutant.
She probably should have seen this coming, you know? If she watched any robot movie ever.
That's pretty bad, but it should go without saying that for creating them, Josephina Bishop is way worse. What should also go without saying is that the Wrath Center Medal goes to Bishop without a doubt. During Super Duper Fly's rampage in New York, by the way, love how they tied the movie into the show here, her original Mechazoid prototype was destroyed in the crossfire, giving her a seething hatred of all mutants.
Mutants.
Rather than simply make the prototype again, Bishop decided to revamp her mission entirely. Instead of making robots to lift humanity up, she made them to tear mutanity down. We could totally make a joke about Bishop's whole villain motivation basically being racism, but when Rod commented that the Turtles seemed like normal kids, she literally said normal kids aren't green.
Regular kids are not green, Rod.
Still, Bishop does actually have some good character traits. While she's willing to endanger or even sacrifice human lives for what she sees as the greater good, she seems to genuinely care about the safety of the species. When she discovers that the Mechazoids are targeting humans with mutations like Rod, she tries to shut them down and even works alongside the Turtles to help. She also once made a pair of prosthetic legs for her sister, which was pretty sweet to say the least. Unfortunately, any goodwill she would have gotten from those deeds is stripped away at the end of episode 6, when she tries to turn herself in a shockingly noble moment on her part. The Earth Protection Force offers her a position in helping them take care of the mutant crisis, and she not only accepts this, but she does so with zero hesitation. And this is after the Turtles have saved her life, and helped save the lives of all humans in the general vicinity, mind you. On the surface, it's hard to think of a villain who could be more evil. But if you ask us, the gold medal of evil has to go to Goldfin. Man, don't you just love when the name and the medal lines up like that? If I would have stopped this series at episode 11, I could have easily put Goldfin at the end of the gray area. I mean, sure, he's a ruthless terrorist who plans to flood the entire city to get his home back, but he's just trying to take back the only place his kind has ever known. That's not a crime, right? Well, no, it wouldn't be, but sadly, that's just what Goldfin would want you to think. In episode 12, it's revealed that he's in a league with Bad Bernie, and has no plan to return the Pearl back to its rightful home in the ocean, meaning he's been lying to his friends for the entire time they've been on land. And if you think that's bad, it gets worse. During their heist and the ensuing fight with the Turtles, Goldfin knocks the entire museum down while the Turtles and the other East River crew members are underneath it, showing a willingness to literally murder his lifelong best friend and family for, well, what was it all for? Well, that, my friends, would be exactly why Goldfin gets both the Gold Medal of Evil and the Greed Sinner Medal. In his own words, Goldfin wanted to use the money from selling the Pearl to live like a king. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make a better, more comfortable life for yourself. Heck, it's pretty admirable. But throwing everyone you've ever loved under the bus for it, attempting to kill them twice, and also engaging in cannibalism, I totally forgot about that for a second, is a whole new level of messed up.
I honestly can't believe you did that.
Yeah, you're like a cannibal, but for fish. That's super messed up, man.
Bishop is a scumbag, undoubtedly, but she at least cared about the humans to some degree, in selling out his soul, his home, his morals, and his family for the sake of a luxurious lifestyle.
Dang, man. That's cool.
Goldfin proved that the only person he cares about is himself, and despite showing some sorrow for betraying his friends, he doesn't go back on his plan for a second. You may have survived that boat explosion, Goldfin, but you've sunk all the way to the bottom of this morality spectrum.